All right.
And
So welcome. And
Rand, just before you start, I am taking notes, just so you know.
Dynamite. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yep.
So as Guy has pointed out before, it's very nice to have the guests to the meeting introduce themselves as well as the members. So Harvey and Hillary and Nancy, will you introduce yourselves in that order, please?
I'm Harvey Rubenstein. I live in Seattle and have a place at Breakers and Corvallis in Neskowin, obviously.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Hillary Gibson. My place in Neskowin is down in the village at the end of Carlton and Breakers.
Okay. And Nancy.
I'm Nancy Vandell, and I own property in Neskowin Crest.
Thank you very much. And Guy, were you thinking the members would also do that, or are we familiar enough? What?
Up to
No.
you. Sure.
Okay, we're good. All right, thank you. So I would ask the members to raise your hand for a visual on approving the agenda today. 2, 3. All right, thank you very much. Agenda is approved. Minutes and summaries from the last meeting. Do we have any additions or edits to the summary that we want to do, or may we accept the minutes with a raised hand?
Accept the minutes with the revisions that were included.
Okay, thank you.
think, Rand, you have the final last version.
Okay, thank you. And then would the members of the committee please let me know at this moment if you have any conflict of interest in today's agenda items.
I'm sorry, no conflicts.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Hearing no conflicts that are being voiced, I accept that we have no conflict of interest from committee members. So I did receive some information from Tom just a few minutes ago about interpretations and such. Tom, would that be a good thing to start with, so we get that information, that understanding before we launch into the review of findings from Middle Housing Code and such like that, or is?
Well, I mean, it is a review, my review of that same document.
Yeah.
I've meant to copy Sarah and I forgot to do that. I should have done that. I think, well, let me put it to you. I found the document to be somewhat confusing and not very clear in a lot of things. They seem to have been paid by the word, but had penalties for using any punctuation.
Tom, which document are you referring to? The code document or the consultant's document?
Consultant's document.
Okay.
So what are we going to review? We're going to review the code or the consultants?
Both, I think.
Yeah, we're doing both. And if you have a document that's clearer, it seems like we should take advantage of that.
Okay. Do you want that first or second?
I would say first. Let's
Okay.
go for that to see if it enlightens us, because it was a confusing document.
Oh, good. I'm glad somebody else was confused.
Oh, believe me, yes, I thought it was confusing.
Okay. So apparently I successfully shared. Okay,
Yes.
so I've supplied some context here for those who want to read it afterwards. I don't think there's any controversy here. Basically just setting the stage for that this is my understanding, which was to me not very clearly written. I do have the introductory paragraph as written, but I would really rather say this is what I think it meant.
Okay.
And this is the document of
From the consultant.
From the consultants.
of the consultant.
Yeah.
Which, to be clear, is the document that Sarah shared with us at our December 2nd meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Correct.
It
indicated
has
here.
a map and has some graphics to it.
Right.
Or not a map, it has some graphics.
Yeah, it has a table, which I had also
Thank you.
problems with. Basically, you can read this or I can read it. The original did say table 2, and I assumed that since it was one table, it was table 1 they were talking about. And okay, and when we're done reading that, the question I had was, I think they meant to permit middle housing to be on par with single family dwellings. I think that's what they meant.
So,
Be a-
Rand,
I'm
I
I'm
don't
back.
know if my
Randall.
system's up. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
And we're all looking at Tom's document, correct?
Right.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
hi everyone, this is Sarah. Can you
Hey,
guys hear me
Sarah.
okay?
Yes.
I actually made a simplified table that probably correlates with what Tom has done, and I'm happy to share that at any time.
Okay, I turned the table into text and split it out by zone, which I think is a lot clearer.
Okay.
We can take a look at it when we get to that point and decide which makes more sense.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
And
Okay.
Tom, I just
Yeah.
want to be clear and confirm that, because it's particularly with regard to clarity. So Sarah said in the meeting, I know you weren't able to be with us at our last meeting, Sarah said that the county is mapping where these provisions, what they look like on the ground in the community planning area.
Yeah,
And
I did.
so that's
Yeah,
forthcoming, and we don't have that yet. And as in my mind, that is one of the critical components of us doing our work.
I did review the video before I did my analysis. So yeah, I'm familiar with that, and I think that would be a great thing. I didn't comment on that in this particular set. So any issues with it? I think this is clear. I think this is what they meant. There are 3 zones, RR, R1, and R3. And this is about them.
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
so I found the audit table, as I referred to it, is to be, the problem was that they tried to do a multi-dimensional concepts in 2 dimensions, and that's always difficult.
Yes.
There's at least 4 dimensions to this document. So that's why I think it was hard for me to parse. There was also these 2 cells were not specifically identified as being R3, but since the rest of them in this line are, I'm assuming that that's R3. And also the fact that they're used colors, that people who are colorblind would not be able to tell any difference between those.
That's Doc Sievert. He's in that category. It's not helpful.
Okay. I'm, as a technical writer, I was sensitized to that. And when I saw this salmon colored and the green and the blue you might see, but the salmon and green, yeah, they went away. So I think, Gary, I think you'll find this to be clear what I've done. Basically, that's just by way of thing. What I did then was take and break out all of those cells as they applied to each one of the zones. And there was about 5 or 6 headings that were used in the columns. And each heading now, this is just the information that pertains to RR, and it's all in one place. They did have the maximum density footnoted, but it didn't seem to be, it seemed to either they forgot a footnote or they didn't do the right one. So that was a bit confusing. So that's the format. Now, Sarah, do you think that your simplified table would be better? There's
Well,
3 of these.
Yeah, no, I think our tables correlate with one another quite well. I'll show my table after you go through your
Okay.
presentation, if that's okay. But
That'd be fine.
what I would say is that the townhome and cottage clusters apply in all zones.
Yeah, I've
So-
repeated things.
Yeah, so I would just say in your highlighted table with the consultants, where
Oh.
you have it on slide
these-
5. Yes, so I
These
have
are all.
that. It's
Okay.
all zones, all residential zones. So basically, I mean, I think probably one of the things just to think about as we walk through this, most jurisdictions are consolidating all of their residential zones to one zone. We're not going to do that though, because there are other uses permitted outright and conditionally in each one of the Neskowin zones that make them unique. But I would say that in terms of middle housing, there will be an identical section in the RR, the R1, and the R3 zones, because they are all going to work with the tables that Tom and I have put together.
Okay,
So
sounds
if
good.
if that helps clarify. And then, yeah, so why don't you go ahead and keep going, Tom? And I'm going to follow my chart, which I have down on one page. 2 pages.
Okay.
And so what I'll do is track what I'm doing to make sure what we're doing has aligned.
Okay, excellent, excellent.
Okay.
Always great to have another set of eyeballs on that.
Mhm.
Okay, so do we want to go through each one of these, make sure we understand them? Because not being a subject matter expert, I don't necessarily know that I don't understand it correctly, if that
I
makes
would like
sense.
to see what you've done.
Well,
Tom,
Christine,
explain the last paragraph. It refers to the without, it says right of 1,500 square foot minimum lot size. That refers to townhouses?
It's the unit itself, Guy. So the platted unit of the townhouse,
Got it.
not the entire property. So each townhouse, as they're platted, must have a 15, and I can talk about this actually a little bit later.
Got
But
it.
it's not the property as a whole, that size is for each unit as it's platted.
Got it.
I didn't reword the footnotes, which desperately needed it. So I think some clarification on the footnotes would be welcome. So we also, this one doesn't say single family, but there was it was a preferred term rather than single family, and I've forgotten what that was. Is that single unit dwelling or something like that?
Yes, that
yeah.
was the discussion around the governor's moving to single unit, not single family.
Mhm.
right,
Okay.
single family residential or single unit.
Okay, so in our interpretation of that, that's what we'll pretend we see.
So I'm gonna depend on somewhat on Guy and Lynn and Sarah to say if this works for them, because this helps me, but I'm not a subject matter expert either. So,
Yeah, let's keep going. Let's see.
yeah.
Okay, so, okay, you guys, you experts, give me the word when it's time to go on.
Yeah, right. Only one
Okay.
expert in the room here.
Okay. So I didn't quite understand this phrasing. I don't know what that means exactly.
Which you're
Right.
referring to?
The other one's highlighted.
Apply minimum lot width and street frontage of no greater than 20 feet. So, That is, so we can get into that, Tom. Basically, that's a minimum lot width requirement. And then also street frontage is talking about the length of the lot of each lot as it abuts a street, or in this case, I would also say a private way. So each townhouse has a fronting of abutting of no greater than 20 feet.
So a
which
townhouse only can
correlates
have,
with the 1,500 square foot lot size.
So Sarah, can I ask then, I mean, I know we're going to go through a lot of what ifs or examples, and I guess it's for me the only way to understand this. So let's take, and when we get to the R1 zone, I'm going to have some questions about what a lot size of 50 by 100 can be used for 5,000 square foot lot, and then we can talk about that. But that in the model code, which we don't have up here, but it had about 5 or 6 examples of townhouses and how they could be arranged on a lot.
Right.
So on a given this statement, when I looked at those models, the only one that made sense to me that could be possibly work on the 50 by 100 foot lot in R1 is where you'd have the townhouses, one in front and one behind, going back to the length of the property, which is your greatest length.
Mhm.
So if you did that, how would I'm just trying to think of how, is it required that the second townhouse have frontage? Because it wouldn't have frontage, it would have,
Right.
it would be stacked behind another townhouse.
So we have some discretion in design standards when we get to that point. For purposes of lot dimensions, Guy, I would like you to remove them from the conversation, except for when we are talking about new partitions and new subdivisions that results in the creation of new lots. So in terms of minimum lot width and depth requirements, their relevance in the conversation, at least for now, is only when we are creating new lots in the subdivision. So I would say, would not get hung up on minimum lot width and depth dimensions. And with what Tom is doing and with the table I will show you later, I think it'll make sense. But when it comes to the 50 by 100, the 50 by 75 for a lot, I would leave it for lot creation, new lot creation for now. Because everything that we're looking at in terms of these standards, let's just focus on existing lots of record.
okay. So,
Okay, I
Right,
think
so-
that'll help us.
Well,
Okay.
I'm gonna, I'll wait and see to the end of this, and I'll
Yeah.
hold my, but I don't
Yeah,
don't quite understand how lot size is not gonna make, or lot dimensions is not gonna make a difference, but I'll wait.
yeah,
Fine.
Okay.
it matters to divisions, but for
Okay.
right now, we're gonna table it
Okay,
okay.
for the sake
So,
of your sanity.
oh, that's already too late.
Yeah, tenuous at best.
Okay, so I added the comment that's for creation of new lots only. So just for clarity.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
So
Okay. Is this also true? That it's only new lot, only new coverage?
For which one, Tom?
This,
Lot
under
coverage.
lot coverage?
No, lot coverage applies to existing lots. So,
Okay.
yep, so that's relevant for just at least our initial walkthrough.
Okay. So that's an option we have.
Correct, and you'll see that in my table as well.
Okay. I didn't flag these as option. That's one thing I should have done is flag these as options or required changes.
You did, Tom, you did a lot of work. It's all good.
Yeah, this
Catch
is
it on the next
great.
round.
Thank you.
Okay. Well,
Ready-
the
ready
next
to move
version,
on?
I'll have them noted. Okay.
Are we done here, Lynn and Guy?
let me just say 2 things that I think are pertinent to this specific part of the conversation. One is that, Tom, I think first of all, thank you for taking the chart that Sarah shared, which I think navigates well to a point, and then it's hard if you're not in the planning world to get it. I don't think it's conversant for property owners, for example. I don't think a property owner could read that and say, oh, okay, well, that's X for my property. So I think your piece may be of great value to the county in helping them create a document that property owners can read, particularly in tandem with the map that is forthcoming. So thank you for that great piece of work. The piece that I think is, which Tom's document, which I didn't get to spend as much time with, Tom, as I did with Sarah's document, which we got at the December 2nd meeting. But the piece that is apparent to me, and we'll have this discussion later in our agenda as well, is I don't think property owners, understand the application of this new provision to their property. And at our core, that's our responsibility if we're going to discuss it in the community plan. People can't make decisions about things they don't understand. And furthermore, volunteers can only be expected to spend so much time understanding new proposals from planning departments, from the state legislature, from anywhere. I mean, you have to be able to communicate to them what is going to happen to what, for everyone in Oregon, is a significant investment, and that's if they own a piece of property. Whether they're a business or an individual or a landlord, they got to understand it. So I think part of what we need to talk about, not in this part of the agenda, but going forward, is that obligation and the fact that we haven't had that conversation with people. We had the meeting at Michael Schlichting's art gallery, and I don't remember the date that was. It's a while ago now. And this is getting much closer to explaining to people exactly what is going to occur. And so I just want to bookmark for us that we have an obligation to make this accessible. The map will go a long way to doing that, and there'll be a reaction to the map, because in the times we live in, people understand things or have time to focus on them just right when they are urgent. And this will reach urgency when we get that map. So I just want to bookmark that. I want to talk about it a little more. I really appreciate, I'm having trouble with, I don't know why this would be on my computer screen, Tom, but maybe it's because I have an Apple laptop, but part of it is the print is not coming through clearly. And so I'm going to print them off on my printer after this meeting so I can read them better and be more familiar with the detail.
Let me go into presentation mode. Maybe that'll help. Problem is, but I can.
Okay, so that one's good. It's the chart that isn't clear, but again, it may be.
Yeah, that wasn't meant to be clear.
Okay.
Looking at it that way, that's just a reference.
To be
Okay. All right.
I knew
All right.
it wouldn't come through. So, okay. So we have covered that and that. And anything else on this?
Setbacks? We're at setbacks.
Yes.
So Sarah, do I read the model code correctly in saying that, in a sense, we just have to discard setbacks when we're talking about middle housing?
Not necessarily. There are maximums that we can apply. Let's see. And so Tom's got it right. So front would be 20 is the maximum. Now there is some deviation for garages and carports. Sides are 5 feet, and I believe it is 10 feet for a street side. And then the rear yard maximum is going to be 15 feet. And that's what's in the model code. So, townhomes, obviously, because you are platting the footprint of the unit, they deviate a bit. But I would say that, what Tom has as the existing setbacks, we will have to modify. But actually not by much if we follow the maximum we can ask for. Does that make sense, Tom?
And we'll
And
have
I've
to-
got that on my table, so I will.
I'll just make a note here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somehow I lost the model code.
The other thing, I don't know if this is helpful or not, and Sarah, you would be a better judge of this than I would, but when I got Sarah's document on December 2nd, I got in my car and drove around where some middle housing has been developed in Portland. And they have a different standard, but they have a lot of the styles
Yeah.
of middle housing that would fit, if not Tillamook County specific provision, certainly the new state law. And so I looked at them, and that was really helpful to me. So for example, there are townhouses where the townhouse behind the front townhouse is not, doesn't see the road. It just is surrounded by houses. But it can be done in a way that's, at least different perhaps than anything you've seen before. So anyway, there are examples of what these opportunities look like. And I would encourage people to go look at them because they are quite different than, the traditional planning for the housing category formerly designated residential housing. So that's just, there is a test case, or there is a example of many of these styles in Portland already.
Okay. Anything else on this slide?
No, and I think I appreciate, Tom, that you've captured that the application has the 0-foot interior side setback for a townhome because they are platted as attached dwelling units. So they're going to have common wall construction and a 0 interior setback.
Okay. Okay, 3 of 3 for Neskowin RR. I've highlighted which is not the most egregious sentence that I've ever seen, but it's on the list.
Welcome to the world of planning writing, Tom. It's,
I don't
yeah,
want to go.
fair enough, fair enough. I agree.
This was my comment that they were paid by the word and penalized for punctuation, including periods and paragraphs.
Right, and so let's talk about OAR 46-235, if you guys want to, for just a minute, since Tom's got that highlighted. So basically what that means is that we have to compare, if we wanted to keep 24 feet, that there would basically, it would not impact the total time and cost of construction, including design, labor, and materials, or the cost of land, or the ability and acquisition of land, and that the total time and cost of permitting and fees to make the land suitable for development can be done under the 24 feet. that a cumulative livable floor area can be produced. And that the proportionality of cumulative time and cost imposed by the 24-foot height limit is in relationship to a public need or interest. Basically the summary of that.
Okay. I guessed that's what it meant, but I don't, the need or interest, but,
Basically, it's for 2 stories, there is a determination that 25 feet is what is appropriate, especially with a pitched roof. So if we keep it at 24 feet, we have to demonstrate that it will not result in an unreasonable cost
Yeah.
or delay to the development. So we're not
Yeah.
a barrier.
yeah, we don't need to worry about snow load, so less of a pitch would probably be okay.
Mhm.
Any other comments on this? Hearing none, I'll go to the next. Okay, this is R1. I think you wanted to weigh in on this one.
Well, in general, I sent questions that I had about R1 because I didn't understand the table, and especially in uses allowed given lot size and lot dimensions. And so that was my question. I couldn't figure it out by the chart, and so that was my biggest question. And I understand that Sarah's got, and you've gone through this, and maybe it'll be clear to me. So I'm anxious to see.
Okay. And like I say, this is I duplicated the information rather than refer. So this is the same comment that basically this was footnoted on townhouses, but it doesn't seem to apply.
So Sarah, you said a few minutes ago that all uses are going to apply to all residential zones. So let's take R1 and this is what I didn't understand. So in the chart, and as Tom has shown here, triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters are all have a square foot minimum.
Yes and no, guys. So when I say that with the zones, each of our residential zones will essentially have the same middle housing code requirements. Right? So 1 to 4 units has to be allowed outright in every one of those residential zones.
Regardless of lot size.
Regardless, because we're changing all of the lot sizes. So that's why I'm saying when you're talking about dimensions and stuff, yes. So I'll go through the table. I'll go through the table with you on that.
I'll wait again.
Okay, thank you. Tom's doing a great job here.
Okay, any other comments on this one?
My other just general comment.
So one of the ways that this one highlights our challenge here is if I think about the community's plans, neighborhoods, I think we're calling them, or different distinct areas, the impact of each of these on those distinct areas is very different. And so that's why this mapping thing, Sarah, is going to inform this, because given the land configurations and the locations and the existing structures, the impact will vary from neighborhood to neighborhood. This is a level of specificity that I think has a lot different impact in an urban setting than a rural setting, and definitely a much different impact in an incorporated area than an unincorporated area. So that's not a statement of advocacy or anything. That's just a fact that became clear when I start, after the consultant produced their first document that we saw.
Point well taken. And yes, I should have that GIS work done, if not by the time we meet again in 2 weeks, but shortly thereafter.
Okay.
We just finished all the STR counts.
So
Great.
I have a question on the zoning, talking about that. This is from the current draft of the community plan. And this was taken from the county, with the exception that I made that key large enough to be able to read. So
Looks very nice, Tom.
summarize what they are and where they are, but people who are living in these areas, which are outside of that, some of these areas, how are they being affected? We will be asked that question,
Yeah,
because these are only Neskowin.
Okay.
it's only Neskowin. It's only the
Yeah.
properties in the Neskowin community.
What happens to the other people?
So the people outside of the boundary.
Yes,
So
because
for
we
the
do have people who are
Right.
considered Neskowin by themselves. They consider themselves part of Neskowin, but aren't part of the community boundary.
Correct. So those properties, because they are zoned rural residential, farm and forest, these code updates do not apply to them.
Oh, so it's business as usual for them,
That's right.
but we're special.
You are special. Their turn is coming. So it's your turn to be special. How about that?
Fair enough.
Okay.
I just don't know what if those individuals living in, say, for instance, where Rand lives, how will they have a voice?
Well,
in
they
that
are part
process?
of your membership boundary, right?
Well, that's
Right.
that is very true.
Yep.
just
So that is
so-
their voice.
So we as NCAC would be consulted when
And
when
so
it's
Sarah,
Yes.
Sarah, in the discussion of that, the fact that rural residential is not subject to the same development standards, is there expectation that what does that do to the pressure on either sides of the line? Does that put increasing pressure on rural residential because they're not having to absorb some of this new need, or does that put inordinate property value pressure on the part inside the community plan because nothing else can be developed?
Right. So I would say I don't anticipate to see a shift in pressure or property values. I think and I'm not, when I say the rural residential zone is exempt, I'm not talking about the Neskowin rural residential zone. I'm talking about the county's rural residential zone. So one of the things, Neskowin has a Neskowin rural residential zone, but it's not the rural residential zone that I am referring to, that is county-wide and is rural residential outside of communities. So Neskowin decided to make one of their zoning designations a Neskowin rural residential, but that is not the actual rural residential zone of the properties outside of the boundary that do not have urbanization rights. So the Neskowin rural residential zone in the boundary has urbanization rights. The county's rural residential zone designation does not have urbanization rights. So there's no change is what I'm saying. When it comes to urbanization rights and opportunities, there is no change to what we have today. Neskowin has a zone that labels properties as rural residential, but in their true form, they are not rural residential. They have rights for urbanization in the future, which is why they are part of this process.
Okay, that's interesting indeed. Anything more on this? Other than fixing a few things.
We'll talk about the setbacks. And yes, you are correct. It is the 10 feet.
Okay, so next slide.
So can I just one thing while we're on R1? One of the questions that I had for the group and for Sarah is, you know, and this goes maybe a little bit to Lynn's point about different areas within the village. I mean, when you, there's a couple of way R1 and R3 are divided up, especially in what we would describe as the village neighborhood. Kind of don't make sense to me. And let's just take Salem Street and McMinnville. Parts of, I think, both streets are, I think McMinnville, I may be wrong, I'm not looking at the map right now, but McMinnville may be divided, part of it's R3 and part of it's R1, and that little stretch. And, you know, the idea, and we don't have to fully discuss it here, but asking those residents if in fact we recommend a zone change for the street of McMinnville to be, let's say, all R1. But I think it's something to think about, and when we look at these maps, to look at the zones, and there may be, you know, our residents may be interested in making asking for a change in the zoning. And I know it's a Measure 56 thing, but if we get a request from everybody on the street, that might be an easy Measure 56. Just a thought.
Right, so that is.
Interesting question, Guy. That's a very good.
Yeah.
Yep,
Mhm.
yep.
So with that, I would say they could gain and lose
Yes.
uses that are already listed in that zone. So that's where it becomes, are we taking away somebody's property right that exists that they want to exercise? Because it's not just, when we look at the zones as a whole, it's not just the residential uses that we're talking about as this process. It's everything else allowed outright and conditionally in those zones. When you start rezoning properties, now you're reallocating or potentially taking away existing development rights.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, to be frank about it, and here's a reference map, having these zones change their definitions is a take for some people. If somebody bought a lot that was assured that there wouldn't be a townhouse next to them, and now there can be, that's a take. So
The difference is that we're covered under Senate Bill 406 to where those take claims. It's very different than if we do this. I mean, I'm not saying we can't, I'm just cautioning you. There's more to it if we start going beyond what 406 prescribes.
well, 406 is meant to encourage housing, middle housing. How does, for instance, making farm use conditional not support that?
Right. That's, I know, I agree, but it's.
Okay, Sarah.
Yes, the question.
This is your doctoral thesis question.
I know. No, it's a good one too. Tom, it's removing a use that exists outright where we have no state mandate to change that.
Oh,
So
but we do have a state mandate. It's 406.
Well,
Make
The
housing
provisions of
available.
406.
Tom, what I think we should do, and I'm going to do this because Sarah, at last week talked about about 10,000 potential bills submitted at the upcoming legislative session. One of those is that in fact we do move farm and forest uses as outright to conditional uses in residential zones. And if in fact our legislature decided, yeah, as part of the 406, a continuum of 406, made that change, we wouldn't have to worry about Measure 56 or Measure 49 or
That's
whatever.
right. That's
So
exactly right.
I would hope
enough.
that all these planning departments, recognizing the need for housing, would in fact make one of their legislative asks to at least move farm and forest out of an outright, and not only an outright use, but the first outright use that's listed, which is like another pain, but that would be nice, Sarah. So you're going to get a letter from me anyways, asking you to, and other planners to do that.
Got it.
All right.
Okay. Okay, I'll start behaving myself now.
Oh,
No,
you're
Tom, write a
fine.
letter.
No, don't.
Write a
don't
letter to
advocate.
Sarah.
All right, fair enough. I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, anything more on this one?
I don't think so.
Okay. And once again, we have the infamous footnote. Let me know when we're done.
Sarah, just.
Yeah.
Do you mind me, because I'm trying to think of a cottage cluster that we have dealt with county since I've been on the commission, but could you describe to us what a cottage cluster would look like in an R1 50 by 100 lot look like?
I can. And in fact, I will show you something after Tom is done. I made a note.
Okay, thank you.
I'm back. Yeah, absolutely.
I was a bit, talking about the design in that aspect. I was a bit confused by the wording around cottage clusters versus townhouses that were detached.
Yes.
That really confused me.
Well, and we can decide. I mean, townhouses, we can say they have to be attached.
Okay,
Because to me, what's the point of having a cottage cluster if you can have detached townhomes?
okay,
So yeah, that's a design thing where we have some room to work.
okay, good enough. Okay, done with this then?
So just for the record and for our folks who are listening, and I've moved to the best internet available in my home right now, and I'm still having a really hard time with breakouts and such. So the notes will reflect that when I can't hear, I'm not catching it, and I apologize for that, but I'm not sure. I'm showing a very strong signal, but something's happening to the quality. So
I'm sorry.
just
We,
FYI, well, yeah, I'm sorry too, but just for purposes of the notes.
Okay, you may be able to see the video and have
Right.
different problems. So maybe reviewing that, because I'm getting it's not at the source, so I'm getting all the stuff. Of course, it could just be me.
No,
Okay.
I'm getting everything too, so I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
we have had internet issues all day today. It just flat out went out at one point and everybody went down. So Lynn, something funky's going on.
Okay. R3.
okay, R3. And looks like this could be a little bit larger. Let's try that. There we go.
Nice.
Larger. Okay, good.
And again, we're gonna put lot sizes and dimensions aside, right, Sarah?
That's right. For right
Okay.
now, for
All
about,
right, okay.
for about 10 more minutes or
I
longer.
got it. I got it.
All right. All right.
Okay. Looks like I made it too. I should have brought it down a little bit.
That's good, Tom.
It's not all fitting on the screen right now. On the slide. I'll fix it later. You can see it here. I'll fix it before I save it.
Okay. I guess we move on because it's going to be explained differently.
Yeah.
Okay. And R3,
Oh, Rich.
okay, looks like I didn't do some of the formatting, but okay. I guess there's not much change to R3. There's a lot of change to R1. That was my feeling.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's as far as I got. I didn't do the analysis of the design changes. I did change them into a little bit more easily readable format, but I'll work on that. And in the document version of this, probably including Sarah's table would be better than the one that they had. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Tom. Significant.
That's
That was
huge.
valuable.
Well, and
Right.
yeah.
Now we
Sorry.
get to see Sarah's versions.
Okay. And Tom, I have to say, I appreciate that because I think that was an excellent way to reorganize what the consultant said. So now I'm going to show you what I've got, and I think we can marry them together. And I will clean mine up too and send you a version because this is
Okay.
just my working document as well. Okay. So while I'm pulling this up, one thing, Guy, the density limitations of the Neskowin Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone still apply.
Yeah, that was one of my questions.
Even if,
Yeah.
yes, and I read that a little bit ago.
Okay.
So even though the underlying zoning may allow for something, it's like anything else. If an overlay zone says something otherwise, that's what controls. Okay, so we don't have to worry about the density in the overlay zone. The overlay zone is going to control that. Okay, so Tom, here's what I did. And I did this table thinking about no matter what the residential zone designation is, the same rules for middle housing are going to apply to every residential zone.
Ah, okay.
Okay. There's other things in the zones that will not change that remain relevant to those areas with those zoning districts, whether it's R1 or R3 or RR. But the housing piece itself, this middle housing we have to allow outright, will carry over in every single one of these zones the exact same way. Okay, so I went with, as Lynn had pointed out, number of units. So I've got number of units going across, and I've got lots, and then I've got standards going down the side. Now, I too, like, one of the things that we have to talk about are townhouses and cottage clusters, because that's where we have some flexibility and discretion in design standards. So I didn't put these on here today. Just trying to figure out how to take all of that and simplify it. So Guy, what I started with was whether it's 1 unit, 2 units, or 3 units, I have 5,000 square feet. Because that's what, for a triplex, it's 5,000 square feet. For a 1 unit or a 2 unit, what the code says is where you can allow 1 unit, you must allow 2 unit. But for purposes of, at first I was just thinking about existing lots everywhere. But then I thought, you know what, we have land in Neskowin that can be divided. So the lot size for a 1 or 2 dwelling unit becomes relevant when we are looking at the creation of new lots or parcels. Because an existing lot of record, if you think about in Neskowin, your Neskowin R1 zone has a minimum 7,500 square foot lot minimum. But if it's a lot of record and it's platted, we're going to let you build a home on it. Think about how many homes we issue permits for that do not meet 7,500 square feet.
Right.
Okay. So when we talk about what's already on the ground, for purposes of a 1 or 2 dwelling unit structure, I'm trying to change my words as we all evolve in this new housing world. In terms of permitting a 1 or 2 unit structure, if it's a lot of record, the size doesn't the minimum lot size doesn't matter because it doesn't matter already. Where a minimum lot size matters for a 1 or 2 dwelling unit structure is going to be with new parcels or lots created, which is why it's still important to have, in my opinion, that minimum 5,000 square feet, because then that also is what the baseline is for a triplex. So basically, what we know, the 1 and 2 dwelling units can be anything. It's just where you allow one to happen, you must allow the other. But where the model code gets into specificity for minimum lot size is for 4 units, so like for a 4-unit townhome. We're saying it has to be a minimum of 7, or the most we can ask for 7,000 square feet. And for a triplex, the most we can ask for is 5,000 square feet. So I am assuming that that is what the community, and I'm sorry for those that are colorblind. I'm just going to do this, you can see where I'm talking. So for a triplex or a 4-plex, what I have plugged in any residential zone, this is the most land area we can ask for that type of development. So that's what I've put in there. The townhome development is a 7,000 square foot lot size. Each townhouse unit, so this is what Tom also had, was going back to that 1,500 square feet. And we must allow a minimum of 4 units outright. So the code being outright is up to 4, minimum 7,000 square foot lot size, and each one has to have the 1,500 square foot footprint. There's some averaging and different things that can go in there, but that's the gist of it.
And they can't be detached.
Well,
I-
we get to decide. So if the community
Okay.
says, no, we want them all attached with common wall construction, we can
Yeah.
write that in.
Well,
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
okay. So then in the lot dimensions, so in Neskowin R1, 50 by 100, Neskowin R3 is 50 by 75. Again, where this becomes relevant is when we start looking at new lots and parcels created, or when we start looking at townhouses and cottage clusters, when we start getting into that fronting and abutting piece and those minimum standards that Tom started touching on. But I mean, in the R3 zone, the 50 by 75 does not total 5,000. Right? So it's your minimum width and your minimum depth. So again, we have several lots already platted, whether they are lots of record or, they've been platted through subdivisions and partitions under the existing rules. I think when we're looking at this, 1 and 2 units are going to fall under what is already platted for a lot of record, where the minimum size requirements start coming into play for new development would be for a triplex or a duplex. Does that make sense?
So, quick question, Sarah, or maybe this is for Guy or Tom or Rand. When you come into Neskowin, you go across the bridge, and you're on your right-hand side, there is a stacked, I think it is 3-unit building, and it's been built during my last 20 years, I would guess. I think it was originally 3 rental units. I don't know its current status, but
I think it's still a triplex. It's not a condo.
it's not a condo, so it's a triplex. So to me, that's a great example of conceptualizing what this looks like built out if they are attached, because it's a really small lot. It's behind another lot. I would bet it's 20-foot footage, and it was quite controversial when it was built. So just for an example to actually look at, that might be helpful to consider. So that's just one thing. The other thing, Sarah, I just wanted to ask is, the more that I learn about this, the more that it seems way past the scope of a community plan, and certainly past our scope to get community consensus on this. This is not something that is a evolution of existing stuff. This is a game changer. This is really will have a significant impact on the property owners of Neskowin. And we need to think about that as a committee, because I have no idea. This is beyond the scope of what is usually done in an unincorporated area through a community plan process. This is a major change in policy. And so at both the state and local level. So I guess I
The
just
thing is,
want,
Lynn, the only concern, Lynn, I have about that, and I understand we're being asked to take on something that we didn't start, that is being kind of laid on us a little bit. The thing is, and I think as Sarah's trying to say to us, there are some choices here. And we need to recommend those choices. We're not going to get around the code. The county is going to come up with language about within that code, within those ordinances, what's allowed on R1 and R3, especially R1. We've got some choices. And I think that's what our community plan group needs to do. And I think Sarah's already talked about one, with the townhouse idea. Yes, it's up to the county to help explain why we have this code, why these changes are being made. That's fine. Yeah, you're right. It's not being generated out of the community planning process, but we are incorporating, as the county's already decided, these are to be incorporated into every unincorporated community has to at least make some of these decisions that we have within this code. So we don't have a choice. And I don't know I don't think we want to not do it. We're not writing the code. The county is writing it. They're just giving us some options within it. So that's what we got to do.
well, I think there's two things here, and maybe we want to have this discussion later. We are not elected. The Citizens Advisory Committee is a self-appointed group of people who's worked hard, but does not represent the whole community and is not elected. And they represent the people who are participating, but there are people who are not participating who I would argue have very little knowledge of what is in this ordinance or this initiative by the county. And so I just want us to have a thoughtful conversation about that, because I just don't hear very often that people want to change Neskowin dramatically. And I think it would be inappropriate for us to bring this level of dramatic change, which is complex, and which we got our first we had our first meeting at Michael Schlichting's, and then we got the document on December 2nd. We have no paid staff. We are all volunteers, and we don't have access to planning consulting services. There's no budget that I know for bringing in a planning consultant and saying, this is what the county's perspective is. We want you as property owners to know that there are also these considerations, whatever they are. And I just have, that is a very real concern on my part, that with those provisos, we're not elected, CAC is not elected, and these are people's, this is Neskowin. So these are properties that people have held now in 3 and 4 generations. And they're gonna have strong views. I have not discussed any of this with anyone, particularly because it's December and most people are focused on Hanukkah or Christmas or getting out of all this rain. But I do think the community plan, one option would be for the community plan to convene a community meeting in January and say, we now have these documents, we now have these maps, we now have sufficient information, and we need direction from you, the community, on how you want this handled, because this is the kind of change that people often will go hire a planning consultant or a lawyer to help them determine how to handle their property.
You know, it might be helpful, Lynn, to have the county prepared kind of a historical timeline about how we got here. Senate Bill 406 and the inclusion of Tillamook County unincorporated communities within that bill was a process that the county went through publicly. People had an opportunity to make comment on what the county was proposing. And the other part of that is the fact that CAC officers are elected. They're elected by the people who want to participate in the community.
Right. But that,
The fact is,
all due respect.
the
with
fact
all
is,
due
Lynn, the fact is, Lynn, that this committee was elected by a vote of the community that participated in the meeting, by our bylaws. So we have been elected
So
by the people who are participating in the process. So we don't have to, you know, this is not, as like I said, this has already been decided at the state level and the county. It hasn't quite been finalized at the county level. That's what we're doing right now. The county has final approval over what each unincorporated community comes forward with. And the planning process we're going through just absolutely fits exactly what the county wanted to happen.
I'd like to comment. I'd like to comment. The Senate Bill at 406 has essentially made us de facto government officials. That's what it's done.
no,
I'm afraid you can disagree that you don't
I
like
do
it, but
disagree.
it is the truth. We are the only representatives of a group which has been made a quasi city by that thing. We've been singled out.
So if I can jump in here, because I appreciate what everyone's saying, and to avoid frustration or waste of your time and energy and effort, just to pull us back to where this is, there are very prescriptive areas of Senate Bill 406, and these prescriptive areas are the ones basically we are talking about today. The non-prescriptive parts, or where there's parts for more detail or choices by a community, are going to largely be in the townhome, cottage cluster, lot coverage, landscaping, design standard elements. I am taking a different approach than the cities. The cities are not working with a citizen advisory committee. They are doing the work with the planning consultant that we have hired, and then going to planning commission and city council. I do not think that is the right path for Tillamook, which is why I have asked all of you for your input on those elements of this process that have some room for some input. So the things that we're talking about right now that are on my table, these are pretty much like, just to walk you through the basic nuts and bolts, the setbacks, etc. These are the things that we have to adopt.
So Sarah,
Yes.
I understand that, and in no way am I saying anything about Senate Bill 406. It's
Yeah,
the
no,
law of the land. It's done. We're all done with it. Now, that is different than, and that does not mean, as there have been in other areas of the state when this effort has unfolded, that doesn't mean that individual property owners can't say, but wait, in my case, I want X. And we have no authority over that. We're not going to be sued by them. We're not going to be representing them. They are just citizens exercising their property owner rights. What I'm saying is the rubber didn't hit the road till December 2nd. And that's a long time. I don't have the date of the Michael Schlichting meeting, but I think it was months ago. I know it was months ago.
Right. And that I just gave the very high overview.
Yes, that's exactly my point. Right. And so I think what I'm saying is that people who own property in Neskowin, and that's different. Some of those people are not even Oregon residents. Mm-hmm. Some of them are from lots of other states.
Right.
Those people would be best served if we can take what you sent us on December 2nd and what Tom has articulated in his document and said, here's the space that we have decisions to make. And Guy, this goes to your point. Here's the space we have decisions. We, as a community plan committee, recommend these things to maintain Neskowin's values and the way it has been for years. But I think we have to decode all that and put it simply and forthrightly to the community of Neskowin. Because the community is the community and they don't elect any of us. And many, many people don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to participate in public processes. They just go to their place at the beach and they love it. And they love it. People love Neskowin much greater than they may love other properties they own, or just, it may be their number one place. But all I'm saying is we need to be transparent.
We do.
With an unincorporated area that's implementing the most significant housing policy in the state, according to state law, which we're all subject to. And this is how it lands in Neskowin, and these are the choices you have, and here's what we've done. And if people, and we can say in a mailing to those people, you're going to get one bite at this apple. Show up or you don't get a bite at the apple. We can be very direct with people, but I do think it's very important to the rest of the community plan, dealing with a whole host of issues that, frankly, many people care about equally to this new housing initiative, and say, this is what is required to keep what we're saying are the community values in place. And this is our recommendation. Guy, I'm not saying we shouldn't make a recommendation, but we can't tell these people this is what we think it is and ought to be. And
Well, I think that's, yeah, in part, Lynn, the process is when we come up with this draft community plan, we will go to the community.
Right.
And we're going to have hearings, our term hearings on it within our own community. Everybody, we will publicize this. We will get these recommended changes out. We will tell exactly as you're saying, people, this is important. It impacts your property rights. I think you're exactly right. We will do, that is the process. So we will bring this all to the CAC. We will notify everybody that we can possibly notify.
And I,
well, no, I'm suggesting the county notify everyone who's a property owner.
correct. And I will do that.
That's fine.
So Lynn,
Yeah.
I will do that anyway, but before
Right,
we get
but
to that meeting, we have
yes,
to have our house in order and have at least like some recommendations for them where they can
right.
put feedback.
I'm just saying that this bite of the apple is the biggest bite of the apple for the entire community, and it is complex. Just listen to the conversations we're having after everything we know about it and all the time we've spent talking about it. I think this housing piece needs to be pulled out and addressed in its entirety in a different way than just here's your community plan. Because frankly, it's so in the weeds and has such a direct impact on why people even care about the community plan. They're going to need some time to chew on it, ask questions, and see pictures. And then they're going to need a pause to digest it and to comment back. If we lump it into the community plan, my concern is the community plan will be high grounded.
Well, and I thought we were going to separate them and hold, like we did at the clubhouse, the golf course, that we were going to.
Okay, okay. Then
If-
that'll
yeah.
get it done, but it's gotta be every property owner gets a notice.
We can, and I'm happy to help with that, Lynn. We can send something out.
So
Rand-
I'd like to be clear
So-
on what's being
okay.
recommended. Lynn, are you saying that we should not have a 406 section in the community plan?
Wait, time out. Sorry, if I can just jump in, because I want to recenter us with some land use stuff. Your 406 will go under the goal 10 housing element of your community plan, Tom, just like it'll go under our.
Okay.
So
Fair enough.
we will make some modifications to goal 10, but they should be minimal based on what you already have and what the county has. I think that'll be more of a housekeeping issue, and that would probably be the last piece to finalizing those areas where we have daylight under 406.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Because that's the relationship between the two of those. And then Randall, you had our timeline that we started with those meetings this last summer.
Right.
And I believe our goal was, so Lynn, this falls into what you're talking about, pulling 406 out and just having some community meetings on the feedback of saying, this is what we have to do. These are our recommendations where we have some flexibility. What do y'all think? I think we were looking at February and March. Is that right, Randall? I'm trying to think of that bar timeline you had. So if we can do this work, Lynn, we are right on track for what Randall had in that schedule to go to the community with a draft product of the 406.
That was my understanding. However, this is more complicated and less easily discernible than I thought it would be at this point. And Tom's gone a long way to making it discernible. Again, I think the map is what's going to get people's attention. I think you could practically send the map out and that to all property owners, and that'll guide the discussion. That information should go to people, February and March we meet.
Yep.
Because people will want some time to process it. And again, if we do it in that way, if we have just 406 meetings and we have clear recommendations from this committee about what we do to comply with our community values, I think we can get something done in March. But my alarm has been that we meet that schedule, number one, and number two, I don't know, it might be 30 years of experience with land use planning. This is really hard to navigate in terms of an unincorporated area with no elected officials and a pattern of land use that we have right now with a coastal zone overlay. This is complicated stuff, and we're responsible for making it understandable to people.
Right.
I'm wondering, Mark, you may, listening to this, I'm starting to have questions about whether or not we have the authority as the community plan steering committee, to in fact come to the CAC with recommendations about the 406 options that we have as a community. I get that it's part of Article 10, I mean, the housing element in the comprehensive plan, and it's going to be within our community plan, but I don't know, and I guess as I'm listening to this, I'm wondering, is it our responsibility to come to the CAC? Does the CAC think that this is part of what we're supposed to be doing?
Sarah.
So the responsibility is mine,
Right.
whether we do it together or I do it on my own and come to all of you and say, what do y'all think?
Right. No, I get that. I get that. And we appreciate, I think we appreciate, every community appreciates the opportunity to have input. And I think Neskowin wants to have input. I just want to be clear that we have been charged with doing this. Mark, you've heard the thing about splitting the two. Any thoughts?
Splitting the two, the
406 and the community
and
plan.
the community plan. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I think that I heard Sarah say that 406 is embedded in the community plan
It's in
under
the-
number 10 or whatever one it is. And so in that sense, I think it probably is a part of the community plan. I'm just thinking back to, and Nancy's on this as well, if I can just talk, and Nancy, maybe she has some comments, but the way that we did the bylaws, which was the timeline was pretty expanded for the bylaws. And I guess I hear this conversation today and I'm a little bit concerned about the timeline, because I hear Lynn and I hear Guy and Sarah and Tom, and I think the community is going to want to wrestle with this for a while. And, you know, Nancy had feedback sessions, so she would, and Tom, you were integral in getting with the bylaws, so you know this, but they would have feedback sessions on sections of the bylaws. And they would ask people to come and make comments, and they'd massage it, and they'd put it back out, and they'd ask for some more comments. And by the time it got to a vote of the community, everybody had seen it. And it was still a 3-hour meeting to vote on the bylaws and go through the bylaws, but everybody had seen it. And you know, as Lynn has said, this is a big deal. And I mean, I hear February and I hear March, but I think it's going to take longer than that for people to weigh in on it.
A couple of things.
Yeah.
Tom, I don't know if it was you or I don't know if Tom or Sarah brought this up, but I think this is how it works. I think we have the community plan document. Tom has done exceptional work there, capturing where I think you could hand it out mostly to the community today and people would say, we're great, we're good to go. And so I think you can do two things at once. We've got that community plan. We can even have meetings going through forward. But what the piece I think we need to fit in and allow time and space to is the housing piece. And if we start that with our recommendations the 1st of February and say, we're going to meet on that in March, get ready, do your homework. And in the meantime, here's the draft community plan with everything else. We could even send that out in January to people and say, you know, we think this looks like a really good piece. There's some things you'd all like to add in, but just conceptually give people the ability to swallow or address 406. What I was objecting to is having big meetings on the whole thing all at once, and we're adding in all this this 406 stuff, and
That's not that.
go crazy.
That's not how we did it. And we evolved the bylaws as a direct result of input from the community. So what we're doing is putting up a straw man. We're putting up what we think is probably a good answer. And in the case of the bylaws, there were some bad answers that we came up with, and we changed it based on the community input. So having a separate one for having a series of separate ones, I would think we probably would do it zone by zone, so that we can have good airing of what the views are and good feedback from the community. So I don't think those are incompatible.
Right.
We didn't publish we published drafts of the entire thing, but I think virtually nobody read any of the drafts before we started actually presenting them.
And if I may, so the table that I put together, the work that Tom has done, so just to outline some next steps. My next steps are to take this table for all of the things that are prescriptive and send it to the consultants and say, okay, do I have this right? Can we do the minimum 5,000 square foot everywhere? You guys tell me if you want to keep the minimum lot width and size requirements in those underlying zones the same. We need to talk about setbacks, right? So going with what we have, I'm assuming that we want to apply all of the maximums that we can for setbacks, lot coverage, etc. I send this to the consultants and say, are we on the right track? Right? Because we need to know that. In the meantime, I think, Tom, you and I, at least, to put a final table together. I think table format, these are the things that are non-negotiable. These are the things that are prescriptive. This is what has to move forward. It doesn't matter what residential zone you're in. And then as a group, we work on the standards for cottage clusters, townhomes, things like, do we want townhomes allowed to be detached? I don't think you do based on what I've heard, but those are the conversations we have. And then that is the stuff we bring to the community. But I think we need to, a presentation with the community, the first presentation would be, these are the things that have to be done the way they've been written. let's walk you through them. We can answer any questions, but folks, this is it. And then either at that meeting or at a subsequent meeting, we carry over with the conversation of, this is what the steering committee recommended for those standards, where we have some input and discretion. How does everybody feel about them? But I think we need
Makes
to
sense.
break them up. And Tom and I could at least put that table together and work on the non-negotiables. And we check
Okay.
that box and get those out of the way.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and include the negotiables as well. Here are the
Well, yeah.
That's the
non-negotiables.
next step.
So that is
Here.
the next step. Tom and I, we put the table together. I send it off to the consultants because I think, Tom, we can merge what we did, because I
Yeah.
agree, I was not pleased. It was a long time to wait for a table to look at it and go, what is this? And what does this mean? So thank you for doing your work, and thank you all for that work. But I think if Tom and I knock that stuff out, we get into the stuff where we have some input, and that's where we
That'd be
focus.
great.
That everybody
Yeah.
under.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Good.
an important part to distinguish what can be done, what can't be done.
Right.
You set it up with the stuff.
And the map.
And the map,
Right,
right?
Because
and the
as soon
map,
as people
right.
see the map and they know the area, that's gonna allow them to move forward conceptualizing it.
Lynn, do you think that people don't know what zone they live in?
Yes.
Yes, I do. In
Mhm.
fact, I've asked people
Yeah.
because I
Ah.
didn't know what zone I lived in, and I mean, I'm being facetious, but yes, they I just think there's it has been the curse of land use in Oregon. It's wonderful we've been able to sustain it for 50 years, but people are not focused on that. They're focused on whatever's in front of them in the moment. And so I don't think people know what zone. I don't think many people know
Mhm.
there's an overlay zone. I know a lot of people don't even know that there's a comprehensive plan for Tillamook County. Just
Yeah.
saying, it's
And my thought is to get the community conversations going, because I don't want you all to be put in a line of fire for your good intentions and good work. I would probably open the presentation, explain why we're here, what the non-negotiables are,
yep.
because I don't want to put any of you in that position.
Thank you.
Well, we've already been blaming the county for this.
Perfect.
Sarah. You don't have to worry.
Blame away, blame away. But then I can say, your amazing steering committee has done this work based on where there's options, and they put together
Yeah.
a package for you to start talking about. And I'm going to turn the floor over to them to talk about what those are. But
Mm.
yes, it is appropriate for me to take those hits up front, give them the bad news of the things they're going to hate that they cannot change,
Right.
and then give you guys the opportunity to talk about that input and the things where you think are appropriate, where there is opportunity for input.
And I don't know, Sarah, it might be helpful to have the water district and the sewer district there at the same time. I have to tell you, there's a whole conversation going on in Neskowin right now about the sewer. And I'm not conversant with it. I just, people are talking about extending the sewer, all the reasons not to do it, et cetera, et cetera. But tying this together, for the government that Neskowin has is the sewer, the water, and the county.
Right.
And so I think having people there to answer questions and to all get on the same page would be hugely helpful.
And I agree. And I can get Chris Keola to come, because you can do a wastewater treatment system for a duplex and a triplex, right?
Yep.
We talk about those areas that are unsewered. It
Yep.
doesn't mean that it's a deal breaker for middle housing.
Yep.
So I think that that's important for folks to understand too. So, yeah, when we get to that point, Lynn, I think we can put together a thoughtful presentation that's comprehensive and strategic, and it will probably be a part 1 and a part 2.
Yep.
Right. And then I agree, then we got to give folks time to chew on it and do that. But I think, Tom, do you think you and I could meet in the next couple of weeks just to finalize our table?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then maybe if we can have a goal of getting that to everyone else in 2 weeks at our next meeting, I'll shift everything off to the consultants just to make sure, because I don't want to get ahead of my skis either turn in a bunch of work and do a DLCD, pop a notice, and DLCD says, oh, Sarah, you missed this part, you didn't do this.
Right, I get it. I
will be feeding documents to everyone.
and also the consultants and the county cannot hire Tom until we are done, until he has, you know, I mean, I'm gonna put a
Well-
statue of Tom in the parking lot, of the highway. So
I want to donate to that. And
there you go.
the good and bad news is that the county is completely broke. So I have no budget to hire Tom anyway. He is.
Very good.
I just have to
So
give
after,
gratitude and sincere thanks and payment.
I will continue to work cheerfully for free,
God bless you.
but I will grouse about the inputs.
Nah.
That's good.
So
So I did have a question for
Yeah.
you about maps.
Yes.
Have they begun to change the county map? Because the one I just pulled up is not the same with the zoning, is not the same as the zoning that's in the document now.
we
There are
have,
different colors.
they're different colors. We have a new GIS contractor who is actually helping us rebuild our GIS database because the one we have is put together with baling wire and shoestring. Should not surprise anybody on this group. And it is a race against time essentially before we want to get everything rebuilt before our old system crashes because we don't know how to fix it. So you will see some changes. But with that, there will be an STR active license layer as well. So that's coming. I've been working on
Okay.
it.
So I will label the current map we have in our draft as obsolete.
Yeah.
And one is coming, because if somebody looks at that, they're going to be completely misunderstand what the status is.
Right. So the only thing that should be changed are the color designations, but the zone
The zones are changing.
themselves.
No, the zones have changed,
No.
because there's a color, there's a purplish color that didn't exist before, and I live in it, and I don't know what I am.
Yeah, there should be no zoning district changes. That requires whole other hearings and processes in and of itself. I will have to take.
Check it out. South Beach Road now is a light purple instead of pink.
But is all of Neskowin R1 now light purple?
Um,
It's a mix of Republicans and Democrats, Tom.
I don't see the color coding for R3 anymore. So it seems to be somewhat broken.
It's broken and under construction.
Okay.
But thank you, because I will bird dog that, because that's good. Okay.
Because you didn't have enough to do.
No, it's totally fine. Yeah. No, that's a big deal, Tom. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So does my table, what you guys saw of it,
I like it.
okay, does
I
that
like
make, okay, thank you, because that will apply outright in all of those the residential zones, regardless of their designation and other uses.
Much clearer than mine.
Well,
Than my
No,
breakout.
Tom, I think yours,
we should mix
They
them.
can embrace
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
because
fair
Tom,
enough.
yours had some, Sarah's is great, but I think
minimal.
it's okay to have 2 or 3 pages on something this complicated, you know?
Okay,
Well,
fair
and
enough.
when it comes time for adoption, so one of the things that I am thinking about with 7 unincorporated communities and about 30-ish zoning districts that this applies to, just that I'm responsible for. Because, you know, the writing and the ordinance and the style is consistent throughout the entire comp plan. One of the things that I was thinking is that in each zone for Neskowin, we could do a hybrid of language. And then I could have a supplemental table like the one that I have created,
Yeah.
where they have the language and then they can refer to the table.
I like what Tom did with the language descriptions.
Okay.
And that could parallel, you're right, parallel the actual table.
Okay,
It
Because
helps, I mean, even people like me who, you know, can't understand one or the other, so.
I'm thinking about future planners, I'm thinking about landowners, I'm thinking about
Yeah.
anyone that is going to use this information, how do we describe it and catalog it in a way that all users can comprehend.
Right.
okay.
So it's just something to think about. One of the things that I would also encourage you all to think about is because we know in everything we do, up to 4 units is what we have to do at least 4 units outright. So when you're looking at your different residential zoning districts, and I'm thinking specifically of cottage clusters, do you want a set of standards that will apply to every residential zone? Or do you want every zone to have different standards for those?
We got to think about that. And you were going to describe to us what a cottage cluster would look like on a 5,000
And-
square foot lot.
And
Yes.
Rand sent us a picture of what a cottage cluster looks like, and I went out and found one that I think is comparable, but not in Neskowin. But Sarah, one of the things that would help me is to understand, to me, less is more. So having the same standard
100% agree.
for all the areas ensures something consistent happens and minimizes litigation, complications, etc.
People trying to.
But it also sometimes drives property owner crazy because they don't understand why, if theirs looks like that and the other one looks like that, why they can't do something differently. So your wisdom, I don't know if other areas on the coast have already crossed that bridge and said, nope, we're just going to make it the same for all. What do you think is the best position for Neskowin in terms of maintaining our value set and our culture?
So just in my brief overview of the model code and the language, I think that units should be limited to 900 square feet. You can make them single story. And then I think we look at landscaping requirements. And then
When you say limited to 900 square feet, you're saying maximum or minimum?
Yep,
Which one?
the cottage clusters.
So the cottage would be a minimum 900 square feet?
No, maximum.
Maximum 900 square feet.
Right, so especially like, taking the village, because people talk about how we used to have all these little beach cabins and now they're all being torn down and rebuilt on or expanded into these, 2,000 square foot homes at 2 or 3 stories. With a cottage cluster, you can limit them to single story. You can limit them to 900 square feet. You could allow them to be 1,500 square feet and 2 stories. So there's a lot of flexibility in there. And I think that's one of the areas where this committee can really work, is to pick what design standards for that suite of options for a cottage cluster that you think fit Neskowin the best.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's what, when I started reading those and I was thinking about Neskowin, I was thinking 900 square feet, single story, right? Now, unless you want to incentivize them, right? So then maybe there's some flexibility with that. So I would encourage, especially as Tom and I focus on our work the next couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks, maybe everybody dive into the cottage cluster standards.
Yep.
And start looking at those to see about those really embody Neskowin the best.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very helpful.
We're the only county in Senate Bill 406 where this applies to unincorporated communities. So when you look up and down the coast, I mean, you could look at what cities are doing, but for unincorporated communities, it's just us.
Right.
This legislative session, Guy, that will change.
I'm sorry I missed that. The dog was barking.
Oh, we're not telling you what she said.
Oh, okay. Just get farm and forest out of there. All right.
You know what? I'm
Be the
looking.
same bill.
Okay, so I'm trying to think. Do you know where Sheltered Nook is in Bay City?
Where what?
No.
Sheltered Nook. No.
Sheltered Nook.
No.
Okay, so Sheltered Nook. They have, oh gosh, what's that frisbee with the baskets? They got one of those.
Ultimate Frisbee.
Ultimate
Frisbee.
Frisbee. Okay, so that in Bay City is technically a cottage cluster.
Wow.
And then there's one coming online in Manzanita, but I don't think I have an aerial photo of it yet to where I could show you. But I'm trying to see, oh, okay, okay, now this is, so these are, let me share this. You can see the aerial view. So this is what the aerial view looks like. Now these are park models.
We
We're
don't
not
have
seeing
it
it yet.
yet.
Yep, it's coming. Okay.
Okay.
So they're used for transient lodging. Because they're park models, but you can see the parking lot is actually over here on your left-hand side.
Mhm.
And then there's parking at the bottom. So there's some parking spaces, and then there's 5 units. They each have a little yard. And you have your own little community living area there.
What's the 6th building? And
Oh,
how much, what's the size of that piece of land?
There are 6 units.
Okay.
Okay, 6 units. And what's the square footage of the lot?
The lot itself, let me go and look and see. That's a good question. Where am I? I'm gonna go down here.
Pick it right out, sir.
Yeah,
You know who the architect was, or did they hire an architect?
they didn't hire an architect. This was a couple who did this on their own. So the lot itself is just over 2 acres, but part of it is the ultimate Frisbee field. So
Got
when
it.
I do just the development, it's 3/4 of an acre.
Wow.
And that includes the parking area.
Okay.
Mhm.
Picture's worth 1,000 words.
And the units are what square footage?
I want to say they're 600 or 700 square feet.
Okay.
So they
And
each have a little porch. They each have a little yard, and there's walkways for connectivity. You can see some of them have like a little area for outside chairs and different things. But
And there's a manufactured housing?
yeah, they're little park models. And for some reason, the way it was designed, I think, so they started out for transient lodging purposes, but I think some of these are being used for long-term rentals. It's in Bay City, so I can't be 100% certain, but
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at the design with the walkways,
Yep.
Yeah.
and they're actually pretty spacious. It's a nice little area back there.
Yeah.
And those are 600 square feet, you
I
said?
think these are all 600 square feet.
Okay.
So did,
All
is this part of the master plan they did? Did Mark Lakeland do a master plan with Bay City, or did it never get adopted, or do you know the status?
They probably had to do a master plan,
Uh-huh.
but especially because they did not plat the lots.
Oh,
It wouldn't be as extensive. Like basically, I mean, honestly, a master plan to do something like this, to design it, is pretty simple.
well,
So,
I thought Bay City it's unincorporated, right?
No,
Basically, it's an incorporated
city,
city.
Okay.
the city.
Well, I thought they hired Mark Lakeland, the architect in Portland, to do a master plan for Bay City, but I never heard if that totally evolved or not.
They may have, yeah, but this was approved several years ago.
Yeah, okay.
and is it short-term rentals? I saw that it has a check-in and check-out date.
I think that they may have licenses through the city, or it might be more like I don't want to say a recreational campground, but something more like a tourism accommodation. But this model of how this is designed actually meets a cottage cluster
Criteria.
yeah.
Yeah. Huh,
And it's all gravelled, so there's no paving, right? So when we think about impervious surface calculations and different things, they've got some nice landscaping in there. I mean, I would say that's kind of something, I think Lynn looking in Portland was a great idea. You can Google cottage cluster designs and see some really cool things. I was in Montana for Thanksgiving, and in Bozeman, right? Because Bozeman's going through like this massive gentrification. It's actually pretty insane to go there and see, but in the middle of these pockets of residential development and a lot of older homes, because Bozeman's an older city, right? And it's a lot of the tinier homes for miners and others, ranchers, but they had some really cool cottage clusters just tucked in there, and they were all single story, and they had these little walkways, but I wasn't the one driving, so I couldn't ask to pull over and take photos. But I agree with Lynn. I mean, there's some things out there that exist that, I was thinking about Neskowin when we were driving through there and thinking how some of those designs would actually fall align with that village atmosphere.
So how does the short-term rentals relate to the middle housing goal? Because in tourism locations, which the village certainly is, you have the biggest need is for short-term housing, not vacation rental, but short-term housing for workforce. And that kind of configuration would be great for that. But who trumps who in that competition? Short-term rentals, workers, or middle housing? I mean, it's all competitive, I would guess.
Very competitive.
Yeah.
So when we were working on the short-term rental ordinance amendments, understanding our housing needs, there was intentional work in putting ownership limitations on the number of licenses moving forward. So you can only have ownership interest in one license. And
Okay.
that is all of unincorporated Tillamook County. So if you have ownership interest in one license in Rockaway Beach urban growth boundary, you don't get to apply and get a license anywhere else in unincorporated Tillamook County. So it's not just the sub area.
Wow.
It's everything.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. And so then, like, if you own a fourplex, you may be able to get a license for one of those units. But with that ownership limitation, you don't get any more. And if someone applies for a license through an LLC, we want a copy of the articles, and we will go to the Secretary of State website and make sure that we have an accounting of anyone who has ownership interest in that LLC.
Wow. And
keep that on record. So that's the big one. And then the other thing that I wrote in for multifamily structures, one license per structure. So if you own, there's the ownership limitation, and then you can't take a fourplex, and even if you own it, it's not condos, it's not townhomes, you own the whole thing, you still only get to license one unit, not only because of the ownership limitation, but because of the 1 unit limitation. If it turns into condos, something like that, the ownership limitation still kicks in. So we're not going to prevent everything from being susceptible to short-term rental licensing, but we have put some pretty serious restrictions and limitations in place to where you can't convert a whole thing.
So if you develop, just to be sure I understand this, if you develop a cottage cluster with 4 dwelling units on it of some square footage, for those 4, you can only get 1 short-term rental?
Correct. If they are all under the same ownership, only 1. If you
So here's a question though, in terms of, this is the part I'm missing. If you wanted to get housing for summer employment, and you were investing in a piece of property in Neskowin, which already is priced over the moon, how is it that you make it work to get more middle housing in there if you can't lease all of them out?
For short-term rental licenses, or are you talking about just,
Lease them out for any length of time. Say you just want to build employee access to housing.
yeah,
Could you just build your own cottage cluster and use it for your employees?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yes, if someone, but I mean, to your point, because what I heard you ask was a very fair question that's on a lot of people's mind is, how do we make sure that with all these housing efforts, we don't see everything townhoused and condoed out and platted out to individual ownership, and then they all become short-term rentals,
Right.
right? And so that's where the limitations in the ordinance are going to be part of that. With the housing production strategies, if they are like, the county has the grant process, and we're getting more money, we're going to be able to start incentivizing more development for workforce housing and for affordable housing. There are limitations on those funds that state that whatever those funds go to for housing, they cannot be used for any type of transient lodging, which means that it commits them to being rented for 30 days or longer.
Okay.
So we are coming up to 4 o'clock. I really try to keep meetings 2 hours or less. We have covered a lot of territory. There's a lot of territory to cover. Can we proceed to look at what's on? Well, we have public comment. Nancy's still here. We could listen, ask for her comments, but we also need to set the agenda for the next meeting. So I'm asking if we're ready to do that today. Are we okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. Nancy, do you have any comments?
I do.
Yes, I'm
I
sure
do.
you.
Interesting discussion. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. And Tom, you are incredible as usual. Just remember, you still are part of our bylaws committee. So, subcommittee. He does. He's great. And Sarah, thank you for everything too. So for my question, I just want to comment on the discussion about whether this is whether the community planning subcommittee has authority to be coming up with proposals for this. And from a bylaws standpoint, I think it's pretty clear we do. So let me just read Article 2. The NCAC is a group of citizens that acts as an advisory body to county, state, and federal government agencies. The NCAC is dedicated to promoting communications between the citizens and government bodies on land use and other relevant issues. In all activities, the NCAC shall provide for and encourage increased citizen participation. Activities should be determined by the membership and include, but not be limited to, making recommendations to applicable government bodies on land use, environmental impacts, public safety, and public health, and take actions as needed to suggest community plan and county code amendments, advocating for consideration of county services, conducting special community studies, and pursuing other matters as deemed relevant by the membership. So I think what you're planning, as Mark pointed out and Tom pointed out, of having well advertised feedback sessions or community sessions to be able to get public input on all these different things, and hopefully a series of them so that the community can really understand all this very complex material, which Lynn, I agree, it's very, very complicated. I think this is the place it should be. I can't think of any other place where there could be community input given and presented in a way that's understandable. So all that comment that you guys gave on like bringing in the water and sewer people along with the county and having a variety of discussions, separating out some of the stuff that's less complicated with some of this middle housing stuff, I think all that's really terrific. And I also want to, I agree completely with what Mark said. Take your time. I think as we did the bylaws, we had a aggressive schedule, but I think it really helped for the community to come together on separate topics and discussed them. And then we went back and made adjustments as necessary. And we learned a lot through that process of
Sure.
getting people from the community in to be able to, that had a lot more experience than a lot of us on the committee to be able to make these adjustments, so that I think by the time the bylaws came out, they were well thought out and well received. So that's one comment. And then I guess I have some questions. Sarah, you talk about that we can choose things, and how much latitude do we really have with all these laws on being able to make these different kinds of decisions that you're talking about today?
So the things that we talked about pertaining to design standards with cottage clusters. There are, the lot coverage maximums currently, Neskowin is at 70. That can stay, that could be reduced. One of the things we need to talk about is how do we add an additional lot coverage requirement for impervious surface? Right, because again, going back to kind of that cottage cluster model that you saw, there was, landscaping and walkways and different things. So that's really where the community input can be heard and folded into this work. The up to 4 units, the maximum 1 parking space, heights, etc. Those are things that, are very prescriptive.
Okay, thank you. So they're kind of the things you're talking about today, but then, and of course, you're the one who really knows what we have some say in versus what's prescribed for us.
And
Okay.
I think what would be helpful, Randall, just thinking about the next meeting and next steps.
Uh-huh.
Everyone came to the meeting maybe after looking at those cottage cluster standards, if we want to tackle those first, to say, this is what I liked, this is what I think would work best for Neskowin and the options that we have. And we start seeing where everyone's visions align in terms of, maybe some of you do think 2 cottage clusters should be allowed to have 2-story structures, or maybe they should be 1,500 square feet.
Yeah.
So I think just walking through that, so we all come back saying, I could get on board with this. This is a hard no. We don't think it fits the community character, because there are some options in there, might be helpful.
And I think, Sarah, that document you and Tom talked about producing, going from today, showing these are the things you have no input on. It's the law. These are the things you can weigh in
Right.
on. That serves as our checklist for saying, everyone
Forget
has.
about it.
Yeah,
Forget about it
forget
on
about
these. This is what we can
Yeah.
do.
Yeah,
That would
Yeah.
be really helpful.
yeah.
So my next item is, could you please, I know things are often rushed right before a meeting, but would it be possible to drop these documents into the meeting folder that the rest of us can get? So, minutes, any of these documents, that would be really nice, anytime, like an hour before or something, so that we could review them.
Well, some of us don't do documents till just the last second.
Well, the last second works too. I mean, I do understand completely actually about that. But even just so that as we go in, we can just go back to the folder and
Yes.
pick them out.
Yeah,
Appreciate
I
that.
thought I had sent that to Candace with the minutes, but I'll triple check, and then the other items, I can forward those to her also to post under our committee. Or it's hard for me to find stuff on the website besides the agenda, but
Yep.
I'm
Yeah.
sure they're there somewhere.
So with the
Yeah,
with the bylaws, I've asked a number of times to please put a meeting folder up where I
Yeah.
can drop them into the meeting folder, and the bylaws or the website points to that meeting folder instead of just having the agenda. And we're still working on that, but that way things are changeable up to the last minute. So maybe you and I can both ask her to work on that a little bit.
Yeah,
So,
and I tried to drop
instead of just the agenda.
Yeah.
the document into the chat, but it can't handle that. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. I
I'll do
was
that.
able
I'll
to
do
find
that
it.
separately
Thank
and
you.
get that to you probably tonight.
I got it,
please-
Rand. Thank you.
Please know that we don't have minutes. I just want to be clear here. It's not,
Summary.
I said from the beginning, I don't have the bandwidth to do minutes because they need to be done better than this. But I think given that we have this recorded message, that meets all standards of accuracy, and that's what we'll rely on if there are questions.
Right. but
Well,
we
again,
can we can share
with
the
my-
summary.
With my bylaws committee hat, Lynn, I'll just say that minutes are required for every meeting.
Well-
And it's part of the Oregon Public Meeting Law. And let me just say, they can be very, very simple. They can be very, very simple.
Then
And in our,
then I will respectfully ask someone else to do them because I am not producing
Yeah.
minutes in the
Yeah.
standard I expect. And we
well,
agree.
let me
Well,
just
let me
finish,
finish.
please. May I please finish? You interrupted me and I would like to finish that what we're saying in the policies and procedures is delineating exactly what needs to be a nod, and we can send you a draft of that, but they are very simple. They do not have to have a lot of detail at all.
Yeah, we're not
But
making a lot
what
of
it allows people to do is just see if there's anything that was discussed in the meeting that it would be worth them going back to the video. Because videos can be very long and tedious, and most people won't just do that. So it just says who they're going to be, what the topic was, what was discussed in terms of topics. But you don't need to get, and any motion, if a motion is made, that needs to be recorded. But
So-
you don't have to get into a lot of detail at all.
So Nancy, and I'm sorry, I didn't hear, I thought I had heard you finish, and I apologize for interrupting. We agreed at least 6 meetings ago, when our previous note taker and data manager left the state, and we were told that it was okay to have a recorded version of the meeting as your minutes. And so if that's not the case, if the recorded meeting does not serve the needs of the CAC, then we should put on our agenda for the next meeting getting the minutes piece in place, because I understand and respect your requirements for minutes, but all I agreed to do was take quick notes, and that's all they are. They're not minutes. So I look forward to the CAC advising us on that, and we will comply as appropriately. But we did reach a decision previously that the film was served the purpose of minutes.
If you'll send us
Okay.
a copy of the quick minutes to the bylaws committee, we can tell you, I'm almost certain that what you're doing is just fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we're looking for anything formal in at all. And
No,
and
it's half a page,
were-
maybe.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I would just say that prior to the Saturday morning's meeting, I went back and looked at the minutes from, I think it was maybe our last our October meeting, general membership meeting, and they were very brief.
Mhm.
So they were not very extensive at all, Lynn. And so we aren't, just to reaffirm that we aren't looking for really detailed minutes, kind of the topics. And today it's been all about really about the Senate Bill 406 conversation. And
Yeah.
And that's
You know,
probably enough.
yeah, a couple of sentences, 3 sentences about that probably would do it.
No
you know?
motions.
So, yeah,
There's
yeah.
all
There's
discussion.
an action for
Yeah.
Sarah and I
Right.
to revise a document.
Right.
Those are the
Right.
two
Include
things.
any action items.
Yeah.
So
So-
there, it's nothing,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
We'll send you a draft too of what we're writing up, because we welcome your input as we do the policies and procedures on it.
Thank you for the
So my last question has nothing to do with bylaws. I'm just curious how, if you're looking at having multiple up to 4, say, townhouses on lots that are in R1, where there are restrictions on sewage and water and that kind of thing, could those take more of a priority than if you have lots that are single, I mean, will there be a certain limit within an R1 area there's still a limit on how many sewage permits and water permits and that kind of thing, correct? So how do you reconcile that?
So I can't issue a permit without a water and sewer availability letter. So as long as I continue to get the letters of available hookups, then I issue the permits. So the
Okay.
district determine, like, they can't, discrimination is not the right word. You can't, or selectiveness, you can't be selective
Yeah.
where they go and where they don't go based on hookup availability unless the district has taken a formal approach to say, we do not have hookups available, but then that would apply to everything.
Right, right. And so with Senate Bill 406, a lot of it really depends on that limit of water and sewage hookup things then. And I thought I saw in the write-up that they're looking at possibly expanding the sewage system.
Right, so that would be a separate discussion from this, but if they are, and then that brings more hookups online, there's that piece too, but I know there was a discussion with the sanitary district when we were looking at the ADU ordinance, and it was the same thing of the district cannot be selective in where it issues new hookups and where it doesn't, if that sewer service is available, that it's just available in the community.
Okay, I appreciate that very much. And yeah, thank you. So that'll be interesting to watch. And then maybe next meeting, because I'm taking too much time, FEMA impacts on all this, I guess, could have a lot to do with this too, correct?
Say that one more time, please.
The FEMA requirements could have something to do with this as well, depending on what ends up happening.
Right, so basically it would just, whatever, again, that's an overlay zone, like the Neskowin Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone, so if that's going to control density in an underlying zone, then it would just be those areas that would also, then depending on if it's more restrictive, then some of these uses, just like any of the other uses, may not be allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you all.
Okay, did we lose Rand? Or is he NCAC host? Ah, there you are.
I think there he is.
You're on mute. Oh, I see. He's taking a
He's
call.
taking a phone call.
No, I'm supposed to be in physical therapy in 10 minutes in Lincoln City, but I'm not sure that's gonna happen, so I had to call him and let him, oh, they're probably still on the line. Okay, so I will get you an agenda for the meeting that includes this kind of a outline of what we can look at, what we can't look at, and prompt people to be looking at cottage clusters and what the choices are within that subject matter are. And hopefully we will have something, a unified document by then from Tom and Sarah, but we won't hold our breath if that doesn't happen by the next meeting. But that's the general nature of what I would propose to be the next agenda. Does that work, or you have other suggestions?
That works.
Okay.
Are we gonna do my suggestion about a preamble?
Yeah, that was the other
okay.
thing on the agenda today, so I think that's gonna carry over. And Guy, I'm sorry if I didn't mean to steal your thunder by putting questions or responses to stuff. I just wanted to stimulate conversation, but
Okay.
Tom has
For-
had a really
yeah.
good idea as how to integrate that into after the executive summary into the document. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, I basically put it in wholesale, made a couple of minor changes, made bullets out of the list. But yeah, I think it's completely appropriate and I like it. That it was a missing piece.
Yeah. Sarah, did you see that? Did you get any that the piece that Guy wrote about before as an early part of our community plan to include a thing that kind of lines out that how the
Puts it in
vision
context.
values really need to drive future decisions and such.
Yeah, it puts the whole plan in context.
Right.
I'll
and then-
forward a link to you, Sarah.
Okay,
to
that's
that.
great. All right, well, thank you. All right, a vivid discussion today of how this all fits together and what we can do and what we can't, and put that into perspective for when, that we can do this. We just have to sort it out amongst ourselves and then bring it to our community and have enough meetings to the point where they're feeling like they understand and are willing to buy into it. So there's a lot of work ahead, and but I think we have a better perspective after today's meeting on how to move forward. So many thanks to Sarah and Tom and Guy for documents that make this, digestible, and we can bite it off and chew on it, as opposed to a complete abstraction that basically those model codes and things seemed like to me. So thank you for your help with all those pieces. All right, I will, let's see, what do we got? Our public comments. I will propose that we adjourn the meeting at 4:14.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you
Okay.
all.
Sarah,
Thank
I've sent you a pointer to the updated draft.
Thank you. And then Tom, we need to put a meeting on the books. Do you want me to let you know what my schedule looks like next week?
I've already asked. I've got it in an email to you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I will wait.
Tom, did you send me